Hi Trevor, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you, Gary?
Oh, very good. Trevor, do you know what? One of the things I remember was when we first recorded, and you were very conscious about me being in the booth too long. And you said it was because of your experience being in the Buggles and being stuck in a studio singing for hours and hours. So you must have learnt a lot about what artists don't want from being an artist for those few years.
Are you kidding? Yeah. Well, I was I was a sort of singer by default in the Buggles, and I wasn't very good, and I got the shit kicked out of me on the sessions. You know what I mean? That awful thing when you've been singing. You know, back in the day when you used to do things as drop-ins, and you do the line over and over and over again till it meant nothing to you. You were just making a noise.
Yes.
And then they'd say, "No, take it again. No, take it again." Sometimes, the talk back would go, and you'd hear people laughing, and they go, "Ah, whatever." And you think, Jesus, this is dismal, man. And also, everybody thinks you're crap, and then then they build some crazy kind of shed around you to try and, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's no good. And I thought, I'm never going to do this.
Right.
And I'm never going to offer a singer 3 different microphones and see how they sound on each mic, So I've always tried to do it in a much more humane way, on the basis that the other way doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work to get angry with people either. Sing the fucking tune! I mean, that's going to work. Never. So
to make the sort of records you've got takes someone, I think, with a lot of taste. Where does that taste come from? Is it what you're listening to as a child, or just try and tell us a little piece of how you educate yourself to do what you do?
That's interesting. Well, you see, I grew up listening when I was a kid. My dad was in a dance band, and all of the early stuff that I heard was Frank Sinatra, Woody Herman. And then I was an absolute child of the Beatles, from 1962 and a half to 63. Me and all my buddies were listening to the Beatles on the BBC and Beat Club and stuff, Mm-hmm. Through the 70s, I was just earning a living, and I played from about when I was 17 till when I was nearly 30. I was playing more or less every night of the week, mm-hmm. In some band just to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the good things about doing that for a long time is, especially with pop music, it drums it into you how simple it's got to be,
Yeah.
or how right it's got to be. I guess that's where my sensibility comes from,
I've shared a studio with you as well. Nobody works harder than you. And I wondered whether a lot of those details, those things that you only hear on the fade sometimes of your records, it's like, that's someone who just loves what they do, but also puts the hours in.
You're right. It takes I think that's one of the things that people don't understand, how long it actually takes. Mm-hmm. And the enemy, of course, isn't being crap. The enemy is mediocrity. It generally stuff comes out mediocre. A very famous producer who's never ever done an interview, a guy called Mutt Lange, I always remember, who's made loads of very famous records, once said to me, he said, "Look, making records, it's a funny thing, but you get a band, you rehearse them for 4 days in a rehearsal room, you've got the song all together, you take them into the studio, you mic them up, they play, it sounds crap." He said, "That's the way it goes." And then from that moment, when you first hear it sounding crap, how much determination, how much energy have you got to turn that into the finished thing?
I open my laptop and I've got access to 17,000 sounds or something. But it was so difficult, wasn't it? In the late 70s, early 80s, it must have driven you all crazy. Was it fun, or was it ultimately quite frustrating?
But you're right, it drove us nuts. We wanted to sound like that,
Yeah.
Yeah. That's of course when we met Hans Zimmer as well, was in 1978, mm-hmm. because Hans was the guy that had a Prophet 5. And he he had some great sounds in it, and of course he was incredibly charming too.
When we worked together, I remember that you were the very first person I ever saw sat on an aeroplane comping vocals, and that was somewhere in the 90s, and I just thought, oh my, that is the best thing I've ever seen. Just give us one thing that you've bought recently that has not been as life changing as a laptop, because they did change our lives, didn't they, in studios? But something that's just taken your eye that you've thought, oh, that's a really cool new thing. Is there anything that pops into your mind?
Look, I bought this. I'll show you.
Ah, this is what we've been waiting for. This is it. Oh. Oh, that's beautiful.
SG. I love guitars.
Is it an old one?
No. It's quite a unique one from a run that they did back in 2007.
Yeah.
Bought by a guy and just stuffed up in an attic.
So, Trevor, one last thing, just because a part of the reason I do these little quips and things is that there's a lot of young people watching who want to have a life like you've had, working in music. And if there was one thing that you picked up along the way that you could just give someone who's 15 or whatever trying to get into music, what would that be?
I think if you really want to get into music, you've got to start young, and you haven't got to be discouraged. Try and be realistic with yourself. Sometimes people get into it and they're kidding themselves. They're never going to do it,
Yeah.
So you have to be a little bit realistic with yourself.
Yeah.
Up to a point.
I noticed that you're playing live more and more now. Is that something you've sort of gone back to that over the last few years?
Yeah, I like playing live because it's done. You've done it and it's done. And you know that when it works, it's a great feeling.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the nicest things. I mean, I really miss it now. God, you must miss it too. When you're out in front of an audience in the evening that want to hear you, and you're playing and everybody's enjoying it, what's wrong with it? There's nothing bad about it.
And we forget that a lot. It's important to remember we're in the entertainment industry, and it's meant to be fun for us as well as the audience. And I think that's the live entertainment is the one time when you're face to face with your audience, you can love and enjoy everything you've done because it's got you to there that night.
I know it's a good feeling. That's the sort of studio. You're working in a submarine, and occasionally you poke the periscope up.
Yeah.
Oh, we hit the ship. That's great. We hit a ship. It's a bit like that. Yeah. Back on, we've got another ship to hit.
All right, Trevor.
All right, man. Well,
I'm going to leave you in peace. Lovely to see you. Yeah. Take care.
Have a good day.
Take care, and you.